and welcome to the Fantasy Survival Guide. Today we're talking about Gambesons, why an adventurer would pick it, and what kind of Gambeson they would choose. I'm coming at this from a fantasy adventure perspective. What would be good in their circumstances? What that means is really up to you. I'm just going to try to build it and give you options from a variety of different angles. As you can see, I have 3 Gambesons here, and these are some of the main Gambesons I've been using for over the past couple of years. I am a sort of mutt in the whole medieval impressionism field. I have done anything from HEMA and fencing to LARP to even historical reenactment. I've dipped my toes in SEA. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert at all, but I'm much more of a jack of all trades, kind of dipping my toes in sort of all these things, and I have quite a few different ideas based in all these different fields. As I gather, it's like a little goblin. Why do you want to wear a Gambeson in the first place? All these Gambesons all share really one thing in common, and that is all multiple layers of fabric with some amount of padding. A gambeson is really just kind of a garment. It's kind of like, it can be a tunic, it can be any sort of like jacket. It's basically just like a normal cloth garment that has multiple layers and some sort of padding. A properly made gambeson is actually going to be a pretty sophisticated piece of equipment. How it works is multiple layers of this fabric is actually really hard to cut with most kinds of blades. A lot of blades will just strike it and not be able to cut the fabric. And even if it does cut 1 or 2 layers, there's usually 3 to 4 more layers beyond that that protects the person using it. The other thing they excel at is the weight. This is going to be, for the most part, the lightest kind of armor you can wear, as well as still providing some amount of protection. If it's personally fitted, if it's made for the user, it's actually going to feel really comfortable. Kind of like a heavier jacket. It's going to feel really comfortable, and this will allow you to wear this on a multi-day trek. If you're an adventurer traveling for a long time or through difficult terrain, this sort of light armor is a great sort of min-max thing. Lots of good armor for a little bit of weight. Now we're going to get into specifics. First off, we'll talk about my lovely Gambeson right here. This is the heaviest Gambeson I own. This is my HEMA Gambeson right here. I use it quite a lot for a lot of fencing, whether for longsword, sword and blocker, or whatever you do else in HEMA. This is more of a modern example. It has mod synthetic materials, it has a lot of mesh here, and the back provides no protection at all. This is to keep me cool and vent a lot of air whenever I'm fighting. However, with some imagination, if you were to see this as sort of an actual heavy-duty Gambeson, which is the same weight as this would be, if you were to imagine that's some sort of same Gambeson in a medieval style or fantasy style, this would be a pretty darn good Gambeson for a really heavy fighter. Someone who doesn't wear full plate yet, but wears a lot of heavy protection if they get into a lot of fights. This Gambeson protects from a lot of blunt force trauma. It has very sophisticated padding. It is not consistent all the way through. Majority of the padding is going to be up here in this sort of shorter upper region. This is the majority where strikes are going to hit. Instead of having more strikes and more layers up here, is going to protect me from those blows. I don't need as much here on the sides or the back, but I do need more in the front and the top. This really sort of min-maxes the weight, so it still feels comfortable to wear while optimizing the protection. Like I said, this heavy Gambeson is great for any sort of adventurer who gets into a lot of fights and wants protection while still wearing a Gambeson and still being relatively light wearing it. You still have a lot of advantages, being able to protect yourself, being able to be light enough to cross difficult terrain, or work hours on wind wearing this. It's still going to be hot, it's still going to be uncomfortable than other options, but this is still a really good option if you want to have this cloth armor, if you're on an adventure and need a lot of protection. A heavy Gambeson is perfect for some sort of heavy fighter or paladin. The next option is actually going to be on the complete opposite end. This is the lightest Gambeson I own. At the end of the day, this is a LARP Gambeson. I use this for quite a few events, such as Reckoning and a few others. It is not going to be as protective as these other 2 options, but the sort of style of what it is, I think is actually still pretty valid. I made this myself, basing it off of a Hawaiian shirt, and is not quite historical, but I love it a lot. As mentioned, this is a very light Gambeson. It only has a few layers of fabric and some amount of padding. I made a few design choices, trying to be as cool as possible, while still being as protective as I could. For a Gambeson like this, I really think this is perfect for a monk or rogue. Someone who needs to be light on their feet, to be able to run fast, or travel long distances. Perhaps a druid who really just wants to have a sort of lighter sort of thing that they can travel through the forest with. This is really good for that. Because it's so light, I don't notice I'm wearing it, and it actually breathes really well and stay cool whenever I'm fighting. A few of the other design choices I made. It is quite open, it's quite light, like I said, allowing airflow. but I also had detachable sleeves. I'm not sure if he's realized this, but for the most part, I'm pretty sure Kramer from Living Anarchism is a big reason why these are quite popular in this sort of field, of why people use this, simply because of that homemade gambeson his aunt got for him. This sort of open armpit to design is inherently less protective than something that these would have. A blade could slip through here, they could cut the rib and get in there. However, everything is risk assessment. This keeps me very cool. It allows air to get in, especially when I move my arms, and allows me to be very cool whenever I'm fighting. If I'm mindful of this, if I am aware I have these weak points, I can actually use to protect this. Armor isn't impenetrable. If you're aware of what weaknesses you have, you can actually optimize your fighting style to protect this. Basically, I really need to protect cuts going from up to this, or thrust going in as well. There's definitely issues. There's definitely going to be things that I cannot protect myself from, but this sort of style of jacket is a good design to make sure you're staying cool while you're out fighting. Even something like this, having this sort of open elbow, this is very unprotected. I would actually probably never fight with this against an actual steel sword, but this is just a risk assessment I've made for a LARP. If you make the same choice, you could probably fix this up by attaching these, making it smaller, attaching it better. Having sort of open points like this is inherently less protective, but it makes you cooler, and that's just the risk assessment you have to make. If you're spending 90% of your time not fighting, if you spend 90% of your time just walking on the road, this might be the gambeson for you. If you're also sneaking around and don't really plan on getting into combat, this is also pretty good because it's really quiet, really light, and I have climbed trees and buildings in this thing. It is perfectly good for that. This is my last one. This is probably the gambeson I put my most attention to recently. It's my newest one. I made it myself, taking everything I learned from this one and put it into this. This sort of one is going to be sort of for a lighter fighter. Perhaps a fighter, maybe a heavier kind of rogue. Someone that needs a kind of decent amount of protection while still being lighter than the heavier gambeson. The other parts of this is very modular. You might notice this part right here this is an arming jacket. It's still a gambeson. It definitely still has a lot of design aspects and provides the same function, but specifically this would be classified as an arming jacket. This sort of jacket is quite protective against a lot of blunt force trauma as well as cuts. However, the special part is it allows me to add different kinds of armor. I can wear my chainmail over this. I can wear my arm harness. I can wear my breastplate to this. I can add bits and pieces to really sort of optimize what I want to protect. This is in tandem with other armor pieces and is more than just the gambeson. But as an adventurer, this is kind of like the risk assessment you need to make of what items you want and what are going to slow you down. If we talk about just the gambeson itself, this is a lighter gambeson than this one, but heavier than this. It's kind of the middle ground. This has, I forget exactly, but like 5 or 6 different layers of fabric with some padding in between. This is really good. This will protect me against cuts. I have used my sharp sword against this, and it has survived really well. The padding also does protect me from a lot of trauma. Not as much as the heavier one, but still well enough I'm not going to die from it. Additionally, the same as the heavier gambeson, I've also optimized the padding. There was more layers up top and at the front than I have at the bottom. I think it's 2 to 3 down here at the base, and maybe like around the same at the back. This sort of gambeson, just by itself, I would actually probably wear on adventurers. What makes this special, though, for me, is the fact I can add different pieces of armor. I have a lot of arming points right here on the arms, as well as different parts of the body. This allows me to add different kinds of armor. And if I'm an adventurer that really wants to sort of full-on protection, this is the perfect option for me. If you're an adventurer that really likes to change their loadout, whether depending on the monster they're fighting, what kind of mission they're on, an armor jacket is great. You can travel just in the jacket whenever you're on your journey, just going and fighting, and then you can add different pieces of armor depending on what you're fighting. I usually will probably leave the forearms on pretty much all the time because they don't affect my weight that much, and they actually are such a good protection against a whole lot of targets. If we talk specifically about the gambeson, ignore all of this. This is a good jacket for a good mid-level fighter, someone who wants a bit of armor, well, not as much as this. They want some to protect themselves, but still be light enough to run around and survive. Now altogether, as a general rule, Gambesons are probably the first thing I'd recommend to any adventurer. Whether it's medieval times or modern day, a Gambeson is going to be one of the more affordable options for a person to wear. It still can be expensive in some different circumstances, both modern day and in medieval times. The amount of fabric you need, the amount of time to make it, but overall, compared to other options, a gambeson is a great piece of affordable protection. The main drawbacks are it can be harder than a few other armor types. If I'm wearing just chainmail over a tunic, I will be a lot cooler than wearing a gambeson, just because the air can pass through. This may be a benefit, because if you're in a colder environment, this is pretty great. However, if it's 80 degrees and the sun is out and you are wearing this, which I have done in a battle and a fight, it sucks and you might actually get hurt by heat stroke. You have to take care of yourself when wearing gambeson. That's part of it. You have to make sure you get enough water and keeping your temperature regulated. That goes for fantasy and that goes for you at a LARP or whatever event you're at. Wearing a gambeson is just going to happen. The next thing about the gambeson is it is not impervious. There are a few drawbacks. Thrusts really actually do get through gambeson. A thrust is very difficult to defend from using fabric or non-hard materials. You have to be careful with that. This is just going to be risk assessment. If you are okay being able to defend yourself from thrust, this would be an option for you. It might be able to slow down the thrust, it might be able to dissuade it, but it's not going to be impervious. It might still get through and might cause still detrimental damage. So just keep that in mind. Some cuts will get through. A very sharp sword, a very fine-edged sword, will actually cut through. You should have seen this in different videos, but a very thin sword, a very finely edged sword, will actually cut through a gambeson. This edge is very difficult to maintain, whether weeks on a journey or even in the middle of a battlefield over a couple hours. But in the case you do come against one, this is probably not going to protect you all the way. It might protect a few layers might get ripped off, but over time, one of those cuts might actually get through, and it's not going to be impervious to that. At the end of the day, being an adventurer is risk assessment. What is your choice? What are the best things to give you advantages, and what has the least disadvantages? And this isn't the same for everybody. Different adventurers, different persons have different requirements. And that's okay. You pick what you want. Whether you want the heavier gambeson, whether you want the lighter one that allows you to run faster or be more comfortable, or something kind of in between, something you can add armor to. Additionally, you can also kind of mix and match. You could have a heavier gambeson with more armor. You can get to like the bowhurt level of just protection. You can have a lighter gambeson with this hard shell protection, trading padding for a lot more mobility while still having decent protection. I have worn these braces with this gambeson and it's worked out perfectly fine. It really all just depends on what you need for your situation, and I am praying God helps you out with that. Anyway, thanks y'all for watching this essay. I'm praying y'all a good day, and God bless your adventures.